All right, so we're going to be working with percent proportions. Before the break, we were working with proportions, but now we're going to be doing them in terms of a percent. And personally, I think that these are easier than the proportions we did before break. So the first thing we need to know is what a percent proportion means. A percent proportion is a ratio that compares numbers to 100. So we're always going to be comparing to 100 because percent is always over 100. So in order to solve, first we need to find and label the information from the question. So over in the side box, what I want us to do is every time we see a percent sign, we're going to circle it. Every time we see the whole, so the total, or if you see the keyword of, that means that it's our total or our whole, and we're going to put it in a box. And last is the part or the is, that means that it's a piece of it. So an example of part would be 10 would be your part out of 20. 20 is your whole questions, and we're going to underline that. The next thing we're going to do is set up a proportion, which is two fractions set equal to each other. So in this proportion, we always put part on top and the wholes on the bottom. So part over whole equals percent over 100 is how it's supposed to be set up. There are some keywords for this. So the word is and of go with part and whole. So if it says 10 out of 5 or 10 out of 50, that means that your 10 is and your of 50 would be your whole. Percent always goes over 100 and it is always, always, always 100. Whenever we're doing this and we're setting up a proportion, we should have one that is missing. When we're writing this as a percent proportion, we're going to mark what is missing with an X. So we're going to put an X like we're going on a treasure hunt. The next thing we're going to do is create a ratio table from this proportion. Now, whichever one is complete, not where the X is what's going to go first. And we're going to label it the same way basically every time. So part and whole, so we don't need to discuss necessarily what it is that they're discussing. So part and whole, and then whichever one is complete. So the fraction top and bottom in your proportion is done. That's the one that's going to go first as your ratio. Your goal is going to be whatever the fraction is that is missing in the area you're looking for. So in order to solve, we're going to find the rule or use a strategy to solve. So finding the rule means that we take it and how could we multiply or divide to get there in one step. And then using strategies would be like doubling, halving, that kind of thing, adding together different ratios. So we're going to go ahead and work on these three problems down at the bottom. So our first question says, Joan walked 50 dogs this week. 40% of the dogs were brown. How many dogs were brown? So the first thing we're going to do is label the information from the question. So I'm going to circle my percent, that percent sign right there. Then I need to figure out what is my whole and what is my part. One of them is going to be in the question. So the question says, how many dogs were brown? That's talking about a specific piece of those dogs. So that's going to be our part. So I underline it and I'm going to put a P because it helps me remember where it goes. That means that this 50 dogs this week is how many she walked. That is our whole because that's the total number of dogs that we're talking about. We're going to set up that proportion next. And we had part over whole always. So percent, I usually always put it as the second one, 40 over 100. Percent over 100. On this one in the front, we need to do part over whole in terms of the dogs. So we don't know the part, so we're going to put an X. And the whole is 50 total dogs. Next, we're going to set up a ratio table. So pay close attention here. So we're going to do part on top, whole on the bottom every single time. So I'm going to use the ratio that is complete. That means it is a full fraction, not the one that has a missing piece. That's going to go at the end. So my part is 40 and my whole is 100. My goal would be the second one where my missing is 50 on the bottom. Setting up this proportion makes it really easy to set up your ratio table quickly and correctly. So how would I go from 100 to 50? Well, I could divide it by 2. So that means I would do the same thing to the top. Divide it by 2, and that would give me a total of 20. So that means that there were 20 brown dogs. Let's look at this next one. Donna read 18 out of 30 pages in her book. What percent of the book did she read? So we need to find the percent, the part, and the whole. So the first thing I'm going to look for is the word or the thing that says percent. So it says what percent. So we're going to circle that, and that's in our question. So our question or our X, what we're missing, is going to be the percent. Now, over here, it says 18 out of 30. That word of tells me that this is going to be my whole. So I'm going to put a box around 30, and that means that 18 would be my part. So if I was to write this again, part over whole every time on these fractions, part is 18, 30 is our total number of pages. We're trying to find the percent, so I'm going to put an X there for what we're missing, and percent is always, always, always over 100. Now that we've set up our proportion, we can go ahead and set up our ratio table. So the ratio table, again, we're going to make it as part over whole, and then we're going to use the completed fraction or ratio as our starting ratio. So 18 and 30, and then our goal, we're going to leave the top blank where the X goes and 100 on the bottom. So this one's going to take a little more work to get there, but it's going to be fine. So how I would do this is I would double this. So I'm going to double this, and then I would get 36 over 60. Then I would kind of add these two together, because remember, you can add ratios, but you cannot just add random numbers, to get to 90, which is getting me really close to that 100 that I'm looking for. 18 plus 36 gives me 54. So we're close, but we're not quite there yet. I still need 10 more to get there. Well, remember, you can use any strategy you want to get there. I need 10 more. How I see that I could get 10 is to take the original and divide it by 3, because 30 divided by 3 is going to give me that 10 that I'm looking for, and 18 is also divisible by 3. So if I go to my 3 line, find 18 and go up, I would get a 6. So now all I have to do is add the 90 and the 10 ratios together to get my answer. 90 plus 10 is 100, and 54 plus 6 would give me 60. So the answer here is 60%. On our last question, it says Laura answered 27 questions correct on her test and scored 90%. How many questions were on the test? So again, the first thing I look for is that percent sign to get it out of the way, 90%. And I know that that always goes over 100, and I always put it as my second fraction. Do you have to? Absolutely not. But let's look for the part and look for the whole. So I'm going to go to the question. It says, how many questions were there on the test? So that is looking more like a total, because we want to know how many there were total. So that's going to be our whole. And I'm going to underline the other piece, because that means that that is our part. So 27 is how many they got correct. So that's a part of it. And we want to know how many questions were on the test. So we're going to put the X for the whole. We're going to go ahead and jump over here and set up our ratio table, part over whole. And then we're going to use the completed fraction first. So 90 over 100. My goal is to get to 27 on the top, and I'm leaving the bottom where the X goes in our proportion blank. So what I would do is, since both of these end in 0, I would divide by 10 to get me a smaller number, because I'm trying to get smaller. So I'm going to divide by 10 on top and bottom. That gives me 10, and that gives me 9. Now I need to go from 9 to 27, and I know that if I look at my 9 line, I can multiply it by 3 to get to 27. That means that 10 times 3 would give me 30. And since these are the same, that means that my answer would be 30 total questions. So 30 questions. My biggest advice when doing proportions is to just make sure that you pay attention to the question and what is your part and what is your whole. Think of it logically with those big, beautiful brains about what is going to be the total that they're asking about and what is the piece or the part that they're asking about. Once you get that down, the rest of this is going to be easy, breezy, lemon squeezy.